So you think you've heard all the myths? Let me tell you about a place that doesn't show up in your history books. It's called Eldarath. Legends say it was a city built from moonlight and magic, hidden deep within the Whispering Forest. This wasn't your average, everyday forest with squirrels and picnic spots. Oh no. The trees here were rumored to hum ancient tunes, the rivers flowed with liquid starlight, and the shadows played tricks on your eyes. It was the kind of place that guidebooks would simply label, "Don't even think about it." For centuries, brave, or maybe just foolish explorers had tried to find Eldarath, but the forest always had other plans. They either got hopelessly lost or were scared away by things that go bump in the night. The city remained a ghost story, a fairy tale told to kids. But then there was Lyra. She was an archaeologist, which is a fancy word for someone who likes digging up old stuff. Lyra didn't see Eldarath as just a myth. To her, it was a real, tangible piece of history waiting to be uncovered. She had spent years hunched over dusty scrolls and cracked clay tablets, piecing together clues that everyone else had missed. Her apartment looked like a library had exploded, with maps pinned everywhere and books stacked high enough to build a fort. Her colleagues would pat her on the back and say, "Good luck with your fairy tale, Lyra," which was their polite way of calling her crazy. But Lyra had a fire in her eyes that could rival a dragon's. She was determined, stubborn, and absolutely certain that the lost city was out there, calling to her. This wasn't just about fame or fortune for her, though finding a city made of gold wouldn't be the worst thing. It was about proving that the stories were true, that magic had once thrived in the world. She had found a fragment of a poem that described a path of silent stone under the weeping moon, and she believed it was the key. While others saw dead ends, she saw possibilities. She traced the lines on her maps with a hopeful finger, imagining the towering spires and glowing gardens of Eldarath. She knew she couldn't do it alone, though. A magical forest filled with who knows what required more than just a shovel and a good attitude. It required a team. A very special, very weird team. Her obsession with Eldarath was all-consuming. She'd wake up in the middle of the night scribbling notes about a new theory or a translation of a single cryptic symbol. She practiced solving ancient riddles and memorized the supposed layouts of Eldarath's defenses. People thought she was chasing a shadow, a figment of her own imagination. But Lyra knew better. The whispers of the lost city weren't just in the old texts. She could almost hear them on the wind, a faint melody promising adventure and wonder. She packed her bag, double-checked her compass, and prepared to step into the legend herself. The Whispering Forest was waiting, and Lyra was done waiting back. She was going to find that city or get very, very lost trying. Finding a team to march into a mythical, monster-filled forest isn't like recruiting for the school chess club. You can't just put up a flyer. Lyra needed people with very specific and slightly unusual skills. First on her list was Aaron. Aaron was a warrior, and when I say warrior, I don't mean he just looked tough. He was the real deal. He could probably win a fight with a grumpy badger while blindfolded. He was tall, strong, and carried a sword that had seen more action than a blockbuster movie. Aaron was quiet and serious, the kind of guy who didn't say much but whose presence made you feel a whole lot safer. He owed Lyra a favor, a big one, so when she came calling with a crazy map and a wild story, he just nodded and said, "Tell me when." Next, Lyra needed a brain to go with Aaron's brawn. That's where Lila came in. Lila was a linguist, which means she was a total genius with languages. She could read ancient scripts that looked like chicken scratches to everyone else. While Lyra could decipher the big picture, Lila could understand the tiny, crucial details, the warnings, the instructions, the curses, you know, the important stuff. Lila was bubbly and talkative, the complete opposite of Aaron, and she thought the whole idea was the most exciting thing she'd ever heard. The chance to see real ancient magic in action? She was packing her bags before Lyra even finished explaining the plan. She brought along a dozen notebooks and a satchel full of colored pencils, ready to document everything. The final piece of the puzzle was the trickiest. Lyra needed someone who could get them through tight spots, literally. She needed a thief. And the best one she knew was Zephyr. Zephyr was clever, quick, and could move as silently as a shadow. He was known for being able to get into and out of any place, no matter how well guarded. He was a bit of a rogue, with a mischievous grin and a tendency to help himself to shiny things. Convincing him wasn't easy. He wasn't interested in dusty old cities. But when Lyra mentioned the legendary treasures of Eldarath, his eyes lit up. Gold, jewels, magical artifacts. Now she was speaking his language. He agreed to join, mostly for the loot, but also because he couldn't resist a good challenge. So there they were, the archaeologist, the warrior, the scholar, and the thief. It sounded like the beginning of a bad joke, but Lyra knew they were the perfect team. They gathered at the edge of the whispering forest, the air growing cool and heavy around them. Aaron checked the edge of his blade. Lila double-checked her translation notes. Zephyr practiced making a coin disappear and reappear in his fingers. Lyra took a deep breath, looked at her strange but capable crew, and felt a surge of confidence. They were an odd bunch, a motley collection of skills and personalities, but together they might just be able to do the impossible. The forest loomed ahead, its secrets locked away, and this not-so-average team was about to knock on the door. The moment they stepped into the whispering forest, it was like entering another world. The sunlight dimmed, filtered through a thick canopy of emerald leaves, and the air hummed with an energy that made the hairs on your arms stand up. The whispers weren't just a legend, they were real. Faint voices seemed to drift on the breeze, telling stories of the past and warning them to turn back. The path Lyra had found on her map was barely there, a faint trail of moss-covered stones that twisted and turned in confusing ways. Zephyr's skills were immediately useful, as he spotted hidden pits and tripwires that would have meant a very short and very painful adventure for anyone else. It was slow, nerve-wracking work just putting one foot in front of the other. Their first major test came in the form of a puzzle. They reached a wide chasm with no bridge. On their side stood a series of stone pedestals, each carved with a different animal. On the far side, they could see the path continuing. Lila immediately got to work, recognizing the script around the pedestals as an ancient riddle. "It speaks of the sun's children and the moon's guardians," she murmured, tracing the symbols. It was a classic logic puzzle. They had to press the animal stones in the right order based on the riddle's clues. They tried one sequence, and a volley of darts shot out from the cliff face, forcing Aaron to deflect them with his sword. Their second try was a success. A shimmering bridge of light appeared, and they hurried across, the whispers seeming to grumble in disappointment. Deeper in the forest, they encountered the Guardians. These weren't your garden-variety security guards. The first was a giant stone golem, slumbering in the middle of an ancient crumbling ruin. It looked like a pile of rocks until they got too close, and then it rose to its feet, its eyes glowing with a dangerous red light. Aaron met it head-on, his sword clanging against its stone body while the others scrambled for cover. Lyra noticed a glowing rune on the golem's chest. "Lila, the symbol! What is it?" she yelled. Lila, peering from behind a pillar, shouted back, "It's the symbol for unmaking!" While Aaron kept the golem busy, Zephyr scaled its back with incredible speed and jammed a dagger into the rune, shattering it. The golem crumbled into a harmless pile of rubble. That wasn't the only guardian. They were stalked by mischievous sprites who tried to lead them astray with illusions, creating fake paths that led to swampy bogs. They had to navigate a river whose water spirit had a seriously bad temper, demanding a tribute of a riddle it couldn't solve before it would let them pass. Lila, with her vast knowledge of old tales, managed to stump it. Each challenge forced them to rely on one another. Lyra's leadership, Aaron's strength, Lila's knowledge, and Zephyr's stealth. They were exhausted, bruised, and on edge, but they were working together like a well-oiled machine. The forest was throwing everything it had at them, but with every obstacle they overcame, they grew more determined. Eldarath had to be close now. It just had to be. After days of grueling travel, they stumbled into a clearing. And there it was, Eldarath. It wasn't a ruin, it was perfect. Towers of pearlescent stone scraped the sky, glowing with a soft internal light. Bridges made of crystal arched over canals of sparkling water. Buildings were adorned with intricate carvings and inlaid with gold and silver. It was more beautiful and more magical than any of the legends had described. Lyra just stood there, tears welling in her eyes. All her years of study, all the ridicule had led to this. She had been right. It was real. The air was filled with a profound silence, the kind that feels ancient and sacred. The team walked forward, their footsteps echoing in the empty city, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. They explored the city for hours, their excitement growing with every new discovery. They found a grand library filled with scrolls that held forgotten histories and powerful magic. Lila was in heaven, carefully handling the ancient texts as if they were made of glass. In the royal treasury, Zephyr's jaw dropped. There were chests overflowing with gems the size of his fist, and stacks of gold coins bearing the face of a forgotten king. He had to be reminded several times by Aaron that they were only there to explore, not to start a new retirement fund. In the central temple, Lyra found the Sunstone, a legendary artifact said to hold the city's life force. It pulsed with a warm, gentle energy, and she knew it was the greatest treasure of all. But their awe was cut short when the city began to tremble. Taking the Sunstone, even just to study it, had triggered the final defense system. The ground shook, and the spectral guardians of Eldarath, ghostly warriors with glowing spears, began to rise from the very stones of the city. Their idyllic discovery had turned into a frantic escape. "I think we overstayed our welcome!" Zephyr shouted, dodging a phantom blade. They had to get out, and fast. The journey back was a blur of chaos and teamwork. Aaron created a path for them, his sword a whirlwind of steel against the spectral forms. Lila shouted directions from a map she'd found, guiding them through a shortcut Zephyr had spotted earlier. Lyra clutched the Sunstone, its light pushing back some of the encroaching darkness. They burst out of the forest, tumbling back into the normal world just as the sun was setting. Behind them, the whispering forest seemed to seal itself off, the entrance vanishing as if it had never been there. They were battered, bruised, and utterly exhausted, but they were safe, and they had succeeded. They sat there for a long time, catching their breath and looking at the incredible artifact in Lyra's hands. They hadn't just found a lost city. They had faced impossible odds and won. Lyra the archaeologist, Aaron the warrior, Lila the scholar, and Zephyr the thief. They were more than just a team now. They were heroes, bound together by an adventure that no one would ever believe. And they knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning.